I'm Lindsay Harrell. I'm the president of the Hilton Head Island Concours d'Elegance and Motoring Festival, and we are thrilled to be here tonight. We are hosting, of course, a virtual event this evening, but the really exciting news is that we are hosting, wait for it, a live event this fall on Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, November 6th and 7th at the Port Royal Golf Club. And we could not be more excited to be back on the show field this fall with all of our friends, celebrating everything that we love, everything motoring, and we are just beyond excited. But we wanted to do a few things leading up to this year's event. Despite the fact that we are having a live event this fall, we wanted to do something to celebrate some of the things that we're looking forward to about the event this November. And one of the things that we are truly excited about is our continued partnership with the Hagerty Drivers Foundation, formerly the Historic Vehicle Association, that we launched in 2019. We started an unprecedented relationship with them where we took a collection of vehicles from the National Historic Vehicle Register and displayed them at our event in 2019. And outside of their Cars at the Capitol event that they do every year on the mall in Washington, D.C., it was the first time a collection had been shown together. So we were thrilled to do that in 2019, and we are really excited to do that again. We are really excited to do that again in 2021 to mark our return to the show field at the Port Royal Golf Club. And we've got some amazing vehicles lined up for this display. Of course, we will sort of tease you all with that throughout the year as we get close to the event this fall. But the first car that we're announcing has been a car that we have been working on for over a year. This was in the works to be part of our event in 2020. Of course, COVID-19 had other plans for us, but we're thrilled that it's continued to be a part of our plans for 2021 and our 19th annual event on Hilton Head Island. And of course, the car that I'm talking about is the 1921 Duesenberg Straight 8, famously known as the Castle Duesenberg. And that is the car we are here to talk with you all about tonight. So to get us started, I wanted to share a little video with you all to kick off the discussion for tonight.
So much of the evolution of our lives and our culture and our landscape has been connected to the automobile.
Duesenbergs were always one that pushed the mold in engine power and speed, styling, putting a racing pedigree engine into a passenger car.
This is a unique story. This isn't passing down your grandmother's china. It is the first ever passenger Duesenberg to be sold to the public, and it has been in the same family for 100 years, so it is also known as the Castle Duesenberg. The first one was ordered by Samuel Northrop Castle.
He knew he wanted the fastest and the best. It was their very first iteration of your own personal sports car.
This is a top-of-the-line automobile, and it is the epitome of luxury. It is the finest of the fine. It's a doozy.
So we are here to talk about this amazing car, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn it over to our board member, Mike McClelland. Mike, make sure you're unmuted, but Mike is going to sort of intro tonight's event and introduce our panelists that are here with us this evening. But thank you all for being here. We're beyond thrilled to have such wonderful people involved with our event, and very excited to see everybody this fall on Hilton Head. So Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Lindsay. First of all, I want to welcome everyone who's watching all over the country and from what I understand, even beyond. First of all, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you tonight's very special panel guests, experts in the industry, people who know more about the Castle Duesenberg and the collector car hobby than just about anyone else. And I'd like to start with Diane Parker, the Vice President of Hagerty Drivers Foundation. Brandon Anderson, the Executive Director and CEO of the Auburn Duesenberg Museum. Casey Maxon, the historian for the Hagerty Drivers Foundation. And finally, Sam Grate, the Curator of the Auburn Duesenberg Museum. Once again, welcome. Thank you so much to all of you on the panel for sharing your time this evening and your expertise. I am extremely excited about having the Castle Duesenberg with us at the Hilton Head Concours this coming November the 6th and 7th. First of all, I sincerely want to thank Brandon and Sam for being willing to bring the Castle Duesenberg some 900 miles to share with the thousands of people who will be in attendance at this year's Hilton Head Concours. Thank you for making what is one of the finest concours in America even better. With that, perhaps the best way to kick off this presentation this evening is to ask Diane to tell us a little bit about the Hagerty Drivers Foundation and the National Historic Vehicle Registration. Diane?
Thank you, Mike. It would be my pleasure. First of all, let me just say that we're really excited to once again join you, not only just for the Hilton Head Island Concours, but actually see people in person as the world has opened up. So last time we had a display there at Hilton Head, we were branded the Historic Vehicle Association, or the HVA, as some people may know us. So this year we will join you as the Hagerty Drivers Foundation. So what does that mean? I'll start by sharing something that probably not a lot of people know, and that is 11 years ago, the HVA was started by Hagerty with a shared belief that the history of our automotive past is worth saving. But Hagerty also believes in supporting the educational programming around automotive restoration and preservation, and the institutions and the businesses that provide those opportunities. So the Drivers Foundation is really a culmination of over 20 years of philanthropic efforts combined under one umbrella. And so the efforts associated with the National Historic Vehicle Register are going to continue as they have since 2014. It will continue to be a federally recognized program by the Department of Interior and the Library of Congress. Most importantly, the register lives on for hundreds of years, and this ensures that our future generations have access to the absolutely profound impact that the automobile has had on our culture and our lives.
Thank you, Diane. Brandon. The Auburn Duesenberg Museum is one of the finest and most important automobile museums in the world, with Duesenbergs that belong to J. Paul Getty, Cords that belong to Frank Lloyd Wright, and over 130 other premier automobiles from the first half of the 20th century. Having said that, what makes the Castle Duesenberg so special, and why has it created so much excitement?
Well, thank you, Mike. And the Castle Duesenberg being entrusted to the care of the Auburn Duesenberg Automobile Museum is quite an honor. We are so excited to be able to share this vehicle with the public in a way that the Castle's wanted, for everybody to be able to appreciate the craftsmanship, the history, and the legacy behind Duesenberg, and also to keep the history of the first ever Duesenberg to the public, and being able to share that on a daily basis, both within our museum walls and outside of our museum walls, and meeting people where they're at. This car is not just a car, as we know. This is the first passenger-built Duesenberg, and I love to share that history with everybody. It is the first vehicle to have, first American-produced vehicle to have four-wheel hydraulic brakes, which were patented by Fred Duesenberg. It is one of the first vehicles and mass-produced to have that straight 8 engine. It shares the family's history of having the Castles take care of that vehicle and be the stewards of it for 99 years before coming to the museum. As we know, the stories that we preserve and tell, whether that's with Hagerty Drivers Foundation or when we're at Hilton Head or being a museum, it's the stories that can connect people. So it's one thing to look at beautiful objects, but it creates a whole new dimension once you're able to recognize the history, the innovation, the technology, and similar to how it was stated in the video, the evolution of our world due to the automobile. So I think there's a lot of excitement for people to be right next to that car and everything that it means.
Brandon, I have to assume that when the Castle family made the decision to donate the Duesenberg to someone, that there were many other suitors other than the Auburn Duesenberg Museum. And I'd like to take this opportunity publicly to sincerely thank Sam and you both for not only accepting the Duesenberg and making it a part of the museum, but more importantly, for going out of your way, for taking all the extra time and effort to share it across the country. And once again, as I mentioned earlier, to bring it all the way down to Hilton Head, in my opinion, is going way above the call of duty for someone responsible for a museum. So I sincerely thank both of you, and I know that everyone that will be in attendance on November 6th and 7th will want to go out of their way to thank you as well.
And on that note, I would really like to thank the individuals that made this possible. Of course, the Castles. We were not the only automobile museum or museum in general to be considered for giving their legacy to an institution. There were other individuals behind the scenes, Gordon McCall with Monterey Motorsports and McCall Motorsports, for example, Eric Caloran, friends of the family that over a couple of years really worked to make sure that this vehicle was entrusted to the right place. And we are just the honored beneficiaries and stewards of that vehicle. And our role as public servants in the museum field is to share that collection with the public, because it's the public that owns the vehicle at the end of the day.
Well, as you're proving, they made the right decision, and we're very happy about that. Sam, while we have you there, the Duesenbergs were manufactured from 1921 until the mid-1930s, a period of about 15 years. Were all of these Duesenbergs all alike? As I understand it, there was a Model X, there was a Model A, I believe there was a Model Y, there was a Model J, there was a Model SJ, and then I understand there was a Model SSJ. Can you kind of tell us about what all that meant and what the differences were?
Yeah, so the Model A was the first iteration of their passenger car. They advertised the Model A as the straight 8, which is how we have our Castle Duesenberg written in the video here and in all the press releases and stories and such. The Model A, they were produced from 1921 through 1926. They produced around 650 of those until the company stopped production, at which time E.O. Cord, shortly after that, acquired the company and then really took Fred Duesenberg's engineering genius, Augie Duesenberg's racing prowess, and just asked them to build the most powerful, the most expensive, the most extravagant motor car that they possibly could. So the first, we believe they made about 13 chassis. The first iteration of that challenge was the Duesenberg Model X, as it came to being called. It featured just a slightly different engine from the Model A, slight adjustments to increase horsepower, but that wasn't enough to appease E.O. Cord. He wanted more of basically everything. So the Model Y, like you mentioned before, is just a one-off car where they took the bodies, cues, and stylings, and you could see how much it resembles what later became the Model J, just how close they were with the styling, the speed. They had a modified engine in it that produced about 200 horsepower back then. And Augie Duesenberg was tasked with destroying the car, including the body and the chassis. And what he did was he took the body and kept it for himself secretly and put it on a long Model A chassis. And in doing so, essentially saved a very important part of the story of going from the Model A through the Model J. Then the Model J was introduced in 1928 for sale in 1929. They produced 481 of those, and that had the 265 horsepower straight 8 engine. It had the top speed of over 120 miles per hour. It had costs of well over $14,000 per whatever body you wanted, accessories, etc. In 1933, then they introduced the SJ, which was a supercharged version of the J engine, and they produced 36 in-house Duesenberg SJs, and that bumped the horsepower from 265 to 320, which was a huge leap. And it took the top speed even further up into the 130 and 140 mile per hour range. The SSJs, they were just 2 cars built like that, I guess you could call it the supercharged J, kind of how that goes. They were just promotional cars given to Gary Cooper was one, and Clark Gable was the second one. Thank you. And Gary Cooper kept his. And what they did there was they took the SJ engine and refined it even further. They made, both of them were speedsters. They were on shorter wheelbase, so they were sportier and kind of looked more in line with the 1935 times for automobile design. And those engines produced 400 horsepower out of that straight 8 engine. So again, when we say, like in that video, it was the first personal sports car. When you're driving a Duesenberg Model A back in 1921 and you're doing 90 miles per hour, or you're driving the Duesenberg Model J and you're doing 120 miles per hour, you've got your personal sports car with you.
And there's a quote in the documentary that was done with the Driver Foundation that Sam stated, and I love it, and I use it to this day and give him credit for it. Duesenbergs were not built for the 1%. They were built for the 0.1%.
I believe it. But Sam, you reminded me, I believe it was probably 10 years ago at the Labor Day events in Auburn, when we had the famous Duesenberg drag races at the airport. I believe, was it Clark Gable's or Gary Cooper's supercharged SJ that actually was one of them that was drag racing down the quarter-mile strip of the airport?
Yeah, I think that was Clark Gable's.
Well, it was pretty amazing to watch a fella trying to speed shift a Duesenberg, grinding gears on a $3 million car, but giving it everything he had because he wanted to win that race. And that was pretty special. Casey, what is the role of a historian at the National Vehicle Register? And what is it about the Castle Duesenberg that makes it such a great fit for this program?
Hi, Mike. So what I do for the Hagerty Drivers Foundation and now with the on the National Historic Vehicle Register is help curate the cars that we document for that program. And the purpose behind it is really to make sure that, you know, these cars that have impacted American history and culture are preserved, their stories live on for years and years to come. As Diane mentioned, the vehicles that we document, the reports, the research, the photographs, all of that material goes to the Library of Congress, where there's an archival standard of 300 to 400 years. The idea being that, you know, this information, these stories will outlive the artifact. In case, God forbid, something were to happen, there's always that story and that legacy that will exist. And, you know, so we try and make sure that that information is recorded. And the Castle Duesenberg is a great example of, here's a vehicle that's, you know, was owned by the same family for 99 years. It started what, you know, the legend of the Duesenberg, the legend of the American luxury car. And that story needed to be saved, needed to be preserved in a place like the Library of Congress.
Well, I'm certain that the position that you have is one that when the day came that the job was offered to you, you probably couldn't hardly believe it. What a tremendous opportunity to have.
Absolutely.
And by the way, that reminds me, I had talked with Brandon a few days ago, and he said he was going to attempt to contact the Castle family to see if they could be on this program this evening, watching it. And I hope that they are. And if they are, I want to say, for all of us here this evening, I long for the opportunity that we get to meet them. They have to be extremely special people, and it would be a real honor, obviously, to have them at the Hilton Head Concours or be able to meet them anywhere. Well, thank you very much, Casey. Brandon, we've talked about the fact that the Castle Duesenberg was purchased in 1921, donated 99 years later. The original buyer was Samuel Castle. Can you give me an idea? I'm trying to go back to 1921 and put myself into his shoes, and I'm going to buy an expensive automobile, and I have an opportunity here. I can buy a fabulous Pierce Arrow, I can buy a magnificent Packard, or I can buy a totally unknown car called a Duesenberg with no history, no background, anything. Why do you think he made the decision to buy the Duesenberg?
Well, from all of the information that we've gathered, is that Mr. Castle actually knew the Duesenberg brothers and knew that they would be coming about with a vehicle that would be a passenger vehicle. So the Duesenberg name was already synonymous with racing. So you look at the Indy 500 and the winners there, and you look at the French Grand Prix. So it was really what the Duesenbergs were doing for the first time, and that's putting that racing engine in a passenger vehicle. So he had originally contacted the brothers about this production when they announced they would be doing the straight eight. Well, actually at that time, it wasn't the straight eight, that they announced that they would be doing a passenger vehicle. And because of the Duesenberg's perfection, especially with Fred Duesenberg, there were modifications along the way and even changing the engine so that it would be that straight eight engine that we know today. He wanted to have the first of what that would be. And this vehicle was unlike anything at its time period. You had mentioned like Packard, Pierce Arrow. Of course, those also very top of the line vehicles and gorgeous vehicles, but this offered something that none of the other ones did, and that was that straight eight engine, the hydraulic, four-wheel hydraulic brakes, and the property that Mr. Castle had was a large sugar plantation, and there was a large growing of fruit there. All the information we have from around that time period, making this vehicle is really is dependable and able to traverse the different landscape of the plantation. After we had documented the vehicle and working with Canepa, who did the restoration work for the Castle family, we received a very large bound copy of photos of the vehicle being restored and some direct quotes from Mr. Castle. One of them is that he penned the body himself, working with Bender to actually create the body. Again, we've seen he was a very tall fellow at 7 feet tall. So it is specifically designed for him. And this gave him the opportunity to really have the first, this is what we're talking about here. And it stayed in the family and it became, all the way and still to this day, a part of an amazing story and amazing connection. One of the things that I really appreciate and love, and recalling that heritage and history, and those of us who love history and seeing some of these quotes, in 1968, when the car came out for an auto show from Hawaii to California, it was actually a nephew, J.B. McIntosh, that brought the vehicle to a Concours in California. And one of the questions he was asked was, when do you plan to retire the old girl? And again, this is September of 1968. And his response was, we have no plans to do anything with her. We have had offers to sell to various museums, including Bill Harrah's in Reno, but she has always been in the family, and we have a rather deep sentimental attachment that goes beyond any intrinsic value. Perhaps someday she will wind up in a museum, but not in the foreseeable future. So even in 68, they're talking about, this is a piece of the family history. This is the family, and maybe one day it'll be in a museum. And fortuitously, and with a lot of planning and thought and consideration from the people behind the donation, it is now in a museum.
Not just a museum, but the museum.
Mm-hmm. It's home.
Now, that raises a very interesting question. And I would open this up to anyone, including Casey as a historian. Was there ever, and let me back up, as all of you know, there was a lot of pre-war automobiles were lost to history because of metal drives to support the war effort in the late 1930s and 40s. So a lot of patriotic people took their automobiles and gave them to the wrecker, and they were destroyed. I don't know how close the Castle Duesenberg came to that, but was there ever a time that this automobile ever came close to being lost to history? Was it ever dumped in a barn somewhere and forgotten, or has it always been out and well cared for, et cetera? And Sam, I guess I would open that to you first.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would say that the Duesenberg as a marquee, I mean, that's talking generally about the first production run. From 1921 through 26, they had some financial backers that helped them produce the car. And this came off the idea of these guys have this racing pedigree. They're well known in the racing field. We can turn this into a passenger car and then use that racing to help sell these cars. Well, in 5 years, they built about 650, and that's not a huge number by any stretch. Fred and Augie Duesenberg, they were master engineers and designers and refining these cars for their speed and for racing, but they weren't salesmen. So in my opinion, it could have been a very easy thing where when production ended in 1926, that if E.O. Cord wasn't around to save the company, or potentially really anyone else, if they saw the potential in there, it could have been just a 5-year run of a small 650 run batch of powerful straight eight cars that might have just fallen into obscurity.
And for this vehicle in particular, with staying with the family too, we do know that there were modifications to the car. So shortly after the car was finished in 21 and delivered to Mr. Castle, or actually we have found Mr. Castle picked it up from Indianapolis. It was not shipped to him. By the time the Model J came out, he wanted to upgrade the car a little bit. So that's 5-6 years after he gets the car. So it had a Duesenberg Model J steering wheel put on it, Model J headlights, the rear rack on the trunk was removed, different wheels and tires were put onto it. So it was kind of modified and upgraded, if you will, at least to the taste of Mr. Castle. And they continue to use the vehicle continuously. In that quote that I had mentioned from the 60s, the newspaper article with some more questions asking about the car, they asked, do you take it out regularly? Do you continue to drive it? And as all of us know, driving classic cars and being in modern traffic, and even the case in the 60s, you need time to start up, to get going in first, shift to second. You need time to slow down and brake, even with the 4-wheel hydraulic brakes. And in modern traffic, it was just almost dangerous and harmful possibly to the car because if somebody did something to it. So it really stayed on the family property to the point where it was on the property and Mrs. Castle finding it and falling in love with it and saying, we've got to get this out. And they took it to a show prior to restoration at Pebble. And then it came back to Pebble after its 5-year, 10,000 hour complete body off restoration. I mean, down to the ash wood and a real preservation and restoration project. So the preservation is preserving what's there, and restoration is taking it back to a specific time period. And that's what they chose to do. And what I think is really amazing, the museum was involved with that restoration by providing the only known original, well, not only known, but mainly the only original photographs of that vehicle. So they replicated items from those photos and then did a complete restoration back to 1921, even preserving all the wood that's there. There was one thought, do we just replicate the whole body? And the answer was no. We are using everything. We are preserving what's there, and we'll replace only what needs to be replaced to bring it back to 1921. So I don't think that this vehicle during World War II had much of a scrap value maybe to it, and also by being in Hawaii, I'm not familiar with how many vehicles from that period in say Hawaii went to scrap efforts, but I think this car was always made sure to be taken care of and stay in the family.
And I would pick up on a comment you made when you said it was did you say a 10,000 hour restoration?
Yes.
As I remember from my business days, the definition of a full-time job is 2,000 hours. So you're in essence saying that it was literally 5 full years of work that went into that restoration. Diane, what is the process that you go through to decide whether a car belongs in the National Vehicle Register?
So we follow the same criteria as the built world, so the Register of Historic Places. So there's 4 criteria. A vehicle only needs to meet 1, but oftentimes, as we've built this program over the years, the cars that we've put on to date have checked more than 1 box. So it would be association with an important person, an important event. It's engineering value, kind of what makes it special as far as the build. And then there's information value, is it maybe the first, the last, or the only remaining good example that is out there.
Can you give me an example of 2 or 3 other comparable cars that are a part of the register that will be, for lack of a better word, cellmates with the Duesenberg, other stable cars?
Geez, Mike, that's like comparing your children or something. I mean,
I'm not asking to be compared. I'm just curious as to what a handful of other automobiles that have received that designation.
So, you know, the greatest thing about the register is how highly diverse all the vehicles are, and that they are really representative of a cross section of different eras and cultural movements. And in terms of provenance and quality, they're all equal as far as their cultural impact. And because of the uniqueness and kind of, you know, what we call that human interest story behind the horsepower. So just to kind of show some of the diversity, we have everything from the Shelby Cobra Daytona Coupe, which was a prototype, one of 6 ever built. Myers-Manx Dune Buggy, one of the most replicated vehicles there is. A Future Liner, a lowride, first production minivan, 15 millionth Model T, and even a 1966 Volkswagen microbus that was, you know, had a pretty significant role in the civil rights movement. You know, each of these cars in and of themselves are extremely special, but what really adds to it is, you know, the story component. It's you know, it's where they began and how they were used over time that really make them even come alive, I'll say.
So in reality, looking at the cars that have been accepted into the register would be an extremely interesting way to learn the history of the United States, certainly during the 20th century.
Absolutely.
Brandon, speaking of the museum, the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum has many times been referred to as the Mecca of the classic car hobby. What makes the museum so special? What is there to see and experience at the museum? Can people hold special events at the museum? And finally, you mentioned that the Frank Lloyd Wright car is there. Could you describe for us what that car is like and what Frank Lloyd Wright said about that car the first time he ever saw it?
Sure. So to talk a little bit about the museum, and being that Mecca, we are the only automobile museum in the world in its original international headquarters. What that means is when you come to our museum, you aren't stepping in replicated history. You are stepping into 1930 to 1937 during the final active years of the company. The building was designed as an Art Deco masterpiece, and similar to the Castle Duesenberg being on the Historic Vehicle Register and part of the Library of Congress, and the Historic American Engineering Record, our building is on the National Register of Historic Places. And to take it a step above that, it's a National Historic Landmark. So our building is also included in the Library of Congress and those records as well for future posterity. So when you step in there, we have the 12,000 square foot showroom with 20-foot tall ceilings, 6-foot tall Italian chandeliers, terrazzo floors, going up the grand staircase and seeing E.O. Cord's office or the clay modeling studios or where the blueprints and the drafting were done. Seeing the original vehicle elevator, which we still use to this day from 1930 to get the cars up and down between the floors. So this place is, the building is unique, the history is incredibly unique. And I really say we're a multidisciplinary museum because we really have something for everybody. We have art, architecture, design, engineering, technology, history of America. So it is a very unique place. people, and I also kind of joke a little bit that it's a bit of a mecca because you have to usually plan to go there. We're a little bit off the beaten path in Auburn, Indiana, but that's where the company was started. And actually without EO cord, and Mike and I, we talked about this, I don't know what many things would look like. Think about the hidden headlights. Think about the innovations that were created there. The first cars with front wheel drive available to the public. So that's probably another 2-hour discussion about cord. We do host events at the museum. We have events that we do programming throughout the year for the public, whether that's classic car concert series, cars and coffee, drive-in movies, being open to the public, doing curatorial chats with Sam. And we have a very rich archive as well that's available to the public and researchers. We do private events too, a lot of weddings, graduations, ceremonies in the showroom on the staircase. And the whole museum is open during your events too, so you can really explore the whole place. And to go a little further with your question about the Frank Lloyd Wright vehicles, a lot of people don't know, but Frank Lloyd Wright was, he was a autophile. He loved vehicles. His designs, well, he was the first one to create and coin the term carport, had created the first attached garage to the home that's in the Roby House, Chicago. He created a city called Broadacre City that was all based on using the automobile as transportation. He designed his own vehicles. None were ever produced, but he sketched them in Broadacre City, even little helicopters that took people around to places. So there's a huge connection with Wright and the automobile. And he owned, people have tried to put the list together before, but perhaps about 50 different vehicles himself. With specifically the Cord, he owned 2 Cord L29s. And he found those vehicles with the lines, their innovation, the technology, the front wheel drive. Basically, in a sense, he said, this is the perfect embodiment of a vehicle and all that it includes in the science and technology. And that was written in, it was a pamphlet that was used as an advertising opportunity from a lot of Cord owners that were sent out to advertise, look, these people are driving Cords, you should too. So he enjoyed them so much, he ended up owning 2 of them, and we own the second one. And then we also, in that story of, Frank and Taliesin and the trek during the winter months from Taliesin in Greensboro, Wisconsin, to Taliesin West in Arizona, Frank would lead in his L29 with his wife, Olga Vana, and then the apprentices, those young architects, would follow in a lot of these other cars, including little Indiana-built Crosleys. We have one of Frank's Crosleys at the museum as well.
Wow. So I think one thing that people always have to understand about the museum to fully understand why it looks the way that it looks is that the showroom was not designed for retail customers, but for actually for the owners of the dealerships across the country and around the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, yep, that's correct. There were dealerships in 89 different countries. So you would come there and you would choose the cars. Sam might have some more to say about that and how, it was not open to the public. And this small town, and literally the name Auburn and then Auburn Cord Duesenberg was literally around the world. That's why we also get visitors from around the world.
Yes, so like he said, in 1931, the export department had its peak where they had 113 dealerships in 93 different countries. And this was coming from a comparatively small automobile company in a remote-ish region of Indiana. And we've got historical photographs where you'll see like members of jazz bands with their cars parked out in front of the building. Silent film stars like Happy Lawson standing next to his brand new car right in front of the museum building. And they would invite celebrities and VIPs to come out there and look at these cars and the engines on stands that they had in there and other Cord Corporation products. And it really was just the international headquarters for this company, and really the company and EO Cords just trademark with the all Art Deco, everything inside.
and I know I talk a lot, but speaking about Cord, is that a lot of people don't know about Cord and the Cord Corporation, and he had Auburn, he had Duesenberg, he had Stinson airplanes. There was an airplane in the showroom in 1930, which we are currently working on restoring and putting back. There was Dodge boats. He had American Airways. It was under his leadership that it was turned into American Airlines. He had railroads, uranium mining, real estate, cattle ranching, TV and radio stations. I mean, he was the serial entrepreneur.
And as I understand it, his picture was on the cover of Time magazine, both in 1932 and in 1934 again. And then when he decided to leave Indiana to go to California, he bought 30 acres of barren ground that today is Beverly Hills. That's pretty good foresight. Speaking of Beverly Hills in Southern California, Casey, I understand you are in LA right now, and I mention that because I want to thank you for taking time to be with us. What are you doing out there tonight?
So we are working on the documentary for the 29th vehicle added to the National Historic Vehicle Register, which we announced a couple weeks ago at the Amelia Island Concours, which is the Back to the Future DeLorean.
Oh, wow.
So we're filming interviews with some of the original designers of the car, people that worked on the film, and then enthusiasts that have that helped restore the car that lives at the Peterson Museum.
Casey, I just don't know how you can stand to do it. It's just got to be really, really tough duty.
Oh, it's hard work, but somebody's got to do it.
A couple of more quick questions. Sam, who was Beverly Ray Kimes, and why did she will her automobile to the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum in her will?
So Beverly Ray Kimes was a incredibly gifted and thorough historian and researcher. She wrote several books during her lifetime. Most notably is the Standard Catalog of American Automobiles, and that starts from 1804 with the steam cars through, I think it was 1974, something on there. And she painstakingly researched all the companies, all the different types of cars and models, and even going with the ones that never achieved production to ones that only made a couple one-off cars to full histories and stories of, at least until the book was published, of like Lincoln and Cadillac and Buick and other automakers of that time as well. And a lot of her research was done at the Auburn Duesenberg Automobile Museum, utilizing our archives and our space. She could spread out. She owned an Auburn, a 1930 Auburn sports sedan, which she named Ralph. And she knew that the museum was the place for that car. So upon her death in 2008, the car was donated to the museum.
And it is still with us.
It is still with us. And we also hold her special archive of all her research and all her writings and thoughts and photocopies and everything that she did to produce the Standard Catalog of American Automobiles and a couple other of the books that she wrote as well.
I think it would be safe to say that she was not just a historian. I think it would be safe to say that she was the greatest historian of the American automobile ever, period. And certainly the most respected and most knowledgeable.
And that book, the Standard Catalog book, is referred to as the Automobile Bible.
Yes, and rightly so. One last question that I have, kind of a wrap-up question, and this would be for Diane and Brandon first, and I'd like for Diane to go first. You both are extremely busy people with lots of obligations week in and week out. What makes the Hilton Head Concours d'Elegance so special that you're willing to commit to being an integral part of this year's event? Diane? Have we lost Diane? Why don't we start with Brandon and we'll try to come back.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Oh, wait, there she is.
You know, your internet only gets unstable when you're on one of these.
Yeah,
like
of course.
The other time it's fine. Yeah. So, you know, Hilton Head was the first Concours to initiate the discussion and ask us to have a display of National Historic Vehicle Register cars. From the first time that Lindsay and I met, she was completely enthralled with the mission of the register, and in particular, that education component. Lindsay and I continue to sing from that same songbook. We see the value of engaging people on a deeper level and kind of broadening the thought process that cars are more than something, that are just, they're cool to look at. That they've shaped our culture, they've shaped our society, and the people that own them or have owned them or the stewards of them truly make them come alive. And, we've talked about it before, but like us, she believes that the human interest story behind the horsepower are incredibly compelling and they're worth telling.
Well, we're honored to have you as a part of the Concours. Truly.
Honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
Brandon?
Well, as I mentioned before, the museum exists for the benefit of the public. That's why we're here. And as the stewards of these vehicles, I kind of shared before, although the museum may own these vehicles on paper, they were donated with the intent that the public owns them and that we are a public trust. So it is important for us to get out and be at large events and very high quality and classic ones that are well known that engage many people as the Hilton Head Island Concours d'Elegance. And so it is very important for us to get outside of our walls and to meet people where they are. So by taking out these vehicles, including, when we discuss this with the Castle family and with others that have donated to us, we share, listen, it's not going to sit in this spot and for 5 years and not get out and show it to people. It's important to show it. That's how we share our history. So going and traveling around the country and displaying the objects that we have to connect and to preserve this field as well and its legacy, and to make sure that we have the same people that are sitting on this call tonight in 50 years, it'll look different, but they hopefully will be doing the exact same thing. And this field will continue to grow and continue to have that interest. So we're all just working for the benefit of the public in the future.
Thank you so much. Lindsay, I'm about ready to turn it back over to you for
I was
questions.
Gonna say,
but I just want to thank everyone. Again, Diane, Brandon, Casey, Sam, thank you for giving us your Sunday evening. Thanks for your expertise. Thanks for your support in helping the Hilton Head Concours. And I look forward to seeing all of you in November, if not before. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you again for joining us, everybody. And I think we've got a few more minutes to hang on if we get some questions from the audience. If you all would like to submit a question before we wrap up here, there is a Q&A feature or a chat feature. You're welcome to put a question in there. We've had a couple come in. I wanted to ask Casey and Diane a question that's come in about how many cars do you all normally add annually to the register? What is your goal? What do you shoot for?
Casey, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So we shoot for 2 or 3 a year at the moment. Obviously, there are thousands of cars that could be eligible for a program like this. I mean, there's no end in sight to all the cars that have helped shape this country. And that's why we're here. That's what we're doing. So we're building that out. We've been working on a program for a while to open this up to the public, to get more cars, and that's coming. So hold on. But in the meantime, you'll see 2 to 3. Some years we've had as many as 4 or 5. It just depends on what we're able to get to. And COVID obviously messed up a few things for us.
Mm-hmm. It did for all of us, I think, right? Or aren't we glad to have it kind of look like it's working into our past, which is fantastic. But Diane, did you want to add anything to that before I moved to the next question?
No, go ahead. I'm really glad.
Perfect. How long have you guys been eyeing the Castle Duesenberg? Oh, sorry, Diane. I think you froze up a little bit. What were you saying?
Hey, night. What can I tell you? I'm freezing up here, kids.
Well, here, I'll shoot this one to Casey then.
Yeah.
How long were you guys sort of eyeing the Castle Duesenberg as a possible addition? I know it was added last year. How long did that process kind of trickle out?
So we launched the program. We started our partnership with the Department of Interior in 2013, about the same time that the car was shown at Pebble. So we've been aware of the car since it was at Pebble. We gave the car an award. We also have an award program called the National Automotive Heritage Award that we do at a number of concours, Hilton Head, Amelia Island, and we actually gave the car our National Automotive Heritage Award. I believe it was 2018 or 2017. Correct me if you know the right date, Diane. I was looking it up earlier. But so we definitely have had this car in our sights for a while. And we kind of go down the list of vehicles that their story is part of the greater automotive story, the greater story of American history. Things like a Model T, right? Things like a Duesenberg. It's a doozy. So which car do you pick? Because the purpose of our program is taking individual VIN numbers, unique cars, and telling their story and connecting that to a broader story. And with Duesenbergs, that's especially hard because it's not like there are Duesenbergs out there that aren't important, right? Every Duesenberg that was built is a special Duesenberg. It was built for a special person. But, you can't look past the fact that this was the first. This is where it all started.
Wonderful. Thank you. Brandon and Sam, we've had a question come in for you all from Mr. Breen. He wants to know how many cars are at the museum. And I'll add to that, besides the Castle Duesenberg, which we've been talking a lot about, what are some of the other highlight vehicles that people need to make sure they see when they're there?
All right, so we typically display about 120 cars. About 80% of them that we have on display are on we own, and then the other approximately 20% are on loan because we always like to bring in new and different cars to show for loan. As far as highlights to see, it's hard to do that sometimes. So we got the Accord that was owned by Frank Lloyd Wright. We have a recreated Accord Speedster created off the same blueprints and drawings and photographs that were used when the car was first built in 1931 and destroyed at the LA Auto Show fire. There's a Accord that we call the Accord Experimental, where they took a Lycoming V12 engine, and it was supposed to be the predecessor to the Accord L29, and they made 3 experimentals, decided it was not the right time to do this, and essentially dismantled and scrapped them all. And with some good research of club members, they put those pieces back together and painstakingly found them. And that's a highlight in the showroom. We have a Duesenberg Speedster that has a storied history with John O'Hara, the author, Donald Carr, who was a well-known Duesenberg owner and driver with ACD Club. There's just so many out there. It's hard to just kind of narrow it down to a few, for example.
Well, thank you. And if people want more information on the museum, where do they go?
You can go to our website. That's automobilemuseum.org. And also we have a very strong Facebook following. We have over 30,000 followers, and our tag on that is ACDAM 1974, or just type in Auburn Core Duesenberg Automobile Museum.
Wonderful. Well, let me ask you one other question that's come in. So obviously one of the points that's so interesting about the Castle Duesenberg is that it stayed within the same family for its, entire life. How rare is that to see a car from the 1920s or even the 1930s stay within the same family throughout the years?
I mean, I've seen cars or heard of cars that have been in the same family for like 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. But personally, I've not heard of one that's crossed into the 70s, 80s, or even the 90-year range, and let alone almost 100.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to end. We're wrapping up on time, and I don't want to go over the hour because you all, like Mike said, you all are very busy and have lots of commitments. So I'm going to end with one final question for all of you, including you, Mike. And we can start with you, Sam and Brandon. But aside from the fact that it's fast and powerful, what is one of your favorite features about the Castle Duesenberg?
You'll go first.
Sure, I'll go first.
Time to think.
If you see the steering wheel that's between us here, that center button there operates the horn. And it's one of those electric horns that need to wind up to get going to be louder. And that just is the coolest sound, especially going down the road and people are waving at you and you do that and they hear that sound too. You know, something you wouldn't hear otherwise, or with cars these days, for example, too. Another thing I really like is that because Mr. Castle was so tall and the seats were placed so far back and the pedals were placed so far forward, when the Castles restored the car, they had Canapa produce extra seat cushions. So us normal height people that drive this car, were able to push ourselves a little bit forward so we can comfortably reach the pedals and drive the car without having to slouch.
For mine, I would say that, well, I mentioned this before when we got the image for our background of the steering wheel. And again, the original steering wheel was swapped out with a Model J steering wheel. And then the family and Canapa restored it from our original photos to get that steering wheel. It's very large. It's varnished wood. You can see the beautiful seams on there and Dutchman joints that are put in to keep that together. And it looks smaller, but it's actually, you feel like it's almost unimaginable. It's like, wow, and I'm really driving this. And it's kind of Mike joking around with Casey and being in California and like, well, somebody's got to do it. Being able, Sam and I, being honored and privileged to drive some of these vehicles and just driving this vehicle. And it brings that history back and just, you know, that is a unique privilege not afforded to many, and we're blessed to be able to do that as part of our jobs.
Wonderful. Casey, do you have a feature that you'd like to highlight to everybody?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's just the overall aesthetics of the car. It is gorgeous, and it is, if you compare it to something else from 1921, it looks like it's 10 years ahead of its time. It looks like something from the 30s. And what you don't necessarily understand from photographs is just how enormous it is. I'm 6'3", and when I'm inside of it, I feel like a little kid. I mean, the passenger seat or the passenger compartment is enormous. Yet the car still looks graceful and sleek and elegant with that full belly pan. I just love the way it looks.
Well, Diane or Mike, do you have anything else you want to add? Favorite features, favorite things about the Castle Duesenberg before we wrap up?
I totally agree with Casey. It's the overall, it's almost ironic to me that they were able to produce a vehicle that is so visually stunning and elegant based upon someone of the stature of Mr. Castle. That how could you possibly, just if you look at that side view, the way the car, just kind of the sweeping flow of the vehicle. I mean, you would think if you're building a car for someone of that stature that it might be somewhat clunky or disproportionate, but it is extremely proportionate and elegant, and the lines are absolutely beautiful. So that, you know, overall for me, that's what it is.
Lindsay, I guess my comment when I look at that car, there isn't anything that stands out other than the significance of it historically. In other words, the very first classic car auction, the very first time there was an auction held to sell old automobiles, was held in Auburn, Indiana in, I believe, 1974. And it was because there was an auctioneer named Dean Cruz who actually auctioned off farms, had heard that some people had some old cars to sell and he sold them. And they were astonished to see that Auburn's and Cords and Duesenbergs were selling for $10,000 and $15,000 and so on. And I would venture to say that because of the Duesenberg, the classic car hobby started when it did. Now, would it have come about anyway? Probably. But the birth of the classic car hobby, I think, started with the car that you're looking at right here. The excitement that the Duesenberg created, the exclusivity that it created, the provenance that it created. It was so special, so much in demand. The history of the classic car hobby starts right here. So that's what that car means to me.
Well, wonderful. Well, we're going to wrap it up with that. I want to thank again, Diane, Casey, Brandon, Sam, and Mike for joining us tonight, and for all of you joining us as well. And I'll just say a couple closing remarks if you don't mind. We did offer a wonderful prize package to everyone who registered for this event. We will be drawing our winner tomorrow, so stay tuned. If you are selected, we will be contacting you. Of course, that included items from all 3 organizations, and we will touch base with you. If you are still looking for a wonderful Father's Day gift, all 3 of us can offer great options for Father's Day. I know it's just around the corner, but there's still time. And of course, tickets for the Hilton Head Island Concours d'Elegance and Motoring Festival, where you can come and see the Castle Duesenberg live and in person, November 6th and 7th, are on sale on our website, www.hhiconcours.com. So we hope all of you will join us this fall for our return to the show field. We are excited to have the Hagerty Drivers Foundation and the Auburn Duesenberg Museum with us this fall, and hope everyone will make it down to Hilton Head Island. Hope you have a wonderful night. And again, thank you for joining.